report a domestic violence related incident. Was reported and carried over to the day shift, and officers from the town police met with officers from the village of Maybrook Police to effect an arrest of an individual that was alleged to have committed some crimes. And engaged him in conversation through the door for an extended period of time. He refused to come to the door, and had information, the officers had information that he may be suicidal as well. After the conversations broke down, the decision was made to make entry. Officers were concerned that he might be attempting to harm himself. So,
how did you guys learn that he was suicidal?
We had prior information. The officers had gotten prior information about that. And then when entry was made, he was not in the initial room, he was in the back of the room. And he was not coming out from another room that was off from that room. It turned out to be the bathroom. And then the officers, one of the officers started to approach him, and he raised his hand up really quick, and he fired one shot, and happened to hit me in the shoulder.
Did you know at that time that you've been hit in the shoulder, or what does that?
What happened
feel
when
like?
I saw the arm, I saw his arm come up. I heard the gunshot, and then it knocked me on the floor, and I realized at that point that I realized early on I was shot. Yeah.
How was your adrenaline running? Did you feel the pain immediately?
No, actually, my whole left side was numb. I couldn't feel anything on my left side initially, which kind of inhibited my ability to get up. And then I was able to. The other officer grabbed my shirt, my jacket, and kind of pulled me a little bit, so I could kind of get my footing. I told him I was shot, and then I got into the hallway, and I was able to get up, get a hold of something, and I was able to stand up. And then once I stood up, I had to walk down 3 flights of stairs, and then get to the car. And then an officer drove me to the hospital. There was another officer in the back seat.
Did you get any emergency, medical assistance there, or just went straight to the hospital?
No, we met up with an ambulance.
Okay.
On Route 52 in the town of Newburgh. Was an ambulance, and they put me in the ambulance, and the ambulance drove me the rest of the way to St. Luke's Hospital.
Have you ever been shot before?
No.
No.
Never.
I guess, so my next question is, what is that like, being shot for the first time? Did you know what to expect?
I can describe, no. I mean, I don't think anybody ever really knows what to expect, but I mean, I can describe.
Yeah.
I say if you gave Alex Rodriguez a 20-pound sledgehammer and told him to hit you with it, and they braced you against a brick wall so you really couldn't, kind of roll with it. So if they basically stuck you against a brick wall and hit you with a 20-pound sledgehammer full strength, that's about what it feels like. It spun me around about 180 degrees and knocked me right on the floor.
Wow.
It's a large caliber round. It's a .45, which is a large caliber handgun round. And so actually pain. I didn't feel pain until we were on the way to the hospital, and I started to gain. My whole left side was numb. I couldn't feel my hands. I had no feeling in my arm, my entire left side. So I started to regain that on the way to the hospital, and then that's when, of course, it became painful.
What level of pain? Worst pain in your life?
It's hard for me to say that. It's funny. My wife's a nurse, but I don't can't say. I can tell you it was very painful. It was very painful. It was mostly pressure, though. It was mostly like pressure-based pain, I guess I would describe it as. Yeah.
And so, at any point when you couldn't feel your hand, did you get worried?
I initially thought, until I saw the wound myself in the car, I initially thought that possibly it had blown my arm off, because I've investigated a lot of shootings, and a round like that certainly is capable of blowing your arm off. So I actually, at one point, and at first I thought it was possible that it blew my arm off. Yeah, that's what it is. Yeah, but then I realized, when I realized where it was, and I was less, I realized that didn't happen, obviously, but I had found out later on that it missed the major artery by 1/8 of an inch.
And so when you are in the moment thinking that maybe, your arm is blown off, what are you thinking in that situation?
I honestly just wanted to get to the hospital, so. Actually, I actually never thought I was going to die, if that's what you wanted to ask me. I didn't have that. I didn't have that thought. I didn't have a thought that I was going to die.
Okay. Yeah. But were you
I knew as long as
grieving for the loss of potentially?
No,
the loss
as long as I knew, as long as I got to the hospital, that I was confident that I was going to be okay.
So missed your artery by 1/8 of an inch. Right?
That's what they told me.
And that's heavy. Wow.
Yeah.
Did you immediately go into surgery? What?
They really there was no surgery. I left the hospital the next day. The round actually embedded in my scapula bone, so it stayed there until I had it surgically removed a couple of weeks ago. So the actual round itself, it did break apart, and but the main part of the round was embedded in my scapula, so you could actually feel it protruding. If you felt in the spot, you could actually feel the bullet, in the bone coming through my skin. So, but I had it removed, I think, a little over 2 weeks ago.
And you're doing okay?
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah. Still, I have some numbness in my fingers, but the doctor said that's going to go away. But yeah.
Did you have to do physical therapy? Or
I'm doing it at home. But as far as like range of motion and stuff like that, it was for a while. There was the loss of that, but it's mostly back. For the most part, I'm sure if I was examined by a doctor, they would tell me that it's not. I'm not doing any jumping jacks anytime soon, but
And that's your left side,
Left
right?
side, yeah.
Are you left-handed?
I'm right-handed.
And just to clarify, for my own sake, was this, so this happened in the village of Maybrook,
Correct.
but the town police responded?
Well, yeah. There's an arrangement. This is an arrangement here. The town of Montgomery is one of the towns that have villages. Like the town of Walk Hill doesn't have villages. The town of New Windsor, the town of Newbury, the town of Montgomery has villages. They're all part of the township. Okay, the residents that live in the villages are part of the township. Okay, there is a whole system that has to do with who provides what services and what have you. The town police provides primary policing services to the town outside of the villages. Okay, secondary services to the villages. In the specific case with regard to the village of Maybrook, the village of Maybrook goes off duty after 11 p.m. Okay, that's been the system here for a number of years. Village residents during after hours would come to the town. We handle their calls. Of course, if it's an emergency priority call, it could be the state police and the town police. But the routine, day-to-day services, when they're off duty, come to the town, generally speaking. So that's the arrangement that exists at present. But when the town officers went to make the arrest in the village, it was during the day shift. The village police were on duty, so they went with the town police to make the arrest.
How many officers initially responded?
Initially responded, I believe there were 3.
3, all from the town? Or?
No, 2 town officers and 1 village officer, and then I think a second one showed up.
And so, one of the things I talked to the village mayor, Dennis Leahy, about, and I know this was a big part of the investigation, is that there was about 40 minutes of conversation beforehand, before going into the apartment?
I was aware that there was, by the time I got there, I was aware that there was a period of time that they had been speaking to him. I didn't know exactly how much time. I was told later on, apparently it was about 40 minutes.
At what point, how soon before entering the apartment did you get there?
How soon?
Like,
how soon from my time getting there did we decide to enter the apartment?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It was something about 20 minutes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So when you guys are having that lengthy conversation with an assailant or just anybody in general, what does that look like? What do you talk to
We were
them
trying to convince him to open the door. We were aware that he'd been arrested before, so it wasn't like it was a first-time experience. I didn't feel, and just trying to make him understand that it just come to the door, open the door, and let's just do what has to, do what we have to do. We have a criminal complaint. The officers, when it comes to domestic violence, today the officers have very little discretion at all, and most all the times, a domestic violence complaint results in arrest. And that's based upon the mandates and the different things that police officers have to comply with today, which are sometimes mandatory arrest situations. So it's not like it's something that people get, it's something that has to be done, and based upon the criminal complaint that came here. Even if a person makes a complaint which fits into the category of domestic violence, even if they don't want to have the person arrested, more often than not, the police officers have to make the arrest and act on behalf of the person. So that's the situation.
And when you guys were talking with him, or in this particular situation, if things hadn't gone the way that they did, what would he have been charged with? Do you know?
I don't recall the charges, but it would have been a situation where he would have been arrested. It's a mandatory arraignment where he would have not have been able to have been released by the officers. He would have to have seen the judge, and he would have been either given bail or sent to jail or whatever. But that's what happened.
And was there any type of at any point would there have been a protection from an abuse order or anything like that?
But order of protection?
Yeah.
Order of protections generally they kind of go along with the package. So if he was arrested and charged with the offense, then more than likely there would have been an order of protection that would have been issued on behalf of the victim. And those conditions are dependent on the specific circumstances.
Right. And when you guys approach a situation, obviously domestic violence ones are always a little unpredictable, probably a lot unpredictable. Mm-hmm. Is it different when you are approaching somebody who you know has a record? Do you change how you talk to them? Do you change
having prior knowledge of a person's prior arrest history and what they may or may not have been charged with would tend to, I'll say, it's the more information you have, the better off you are. But I mean, it doesn't say that you're necessarily going to you're not going to treat the person differently because they've been arrested before. But if you have somebody who you know has a history of mental illness, if you know you have somebody who has a history of suicidal behavior, if you know you have of somebody who has a history of assaulting police officers, weapons possession, things like that, those are all things that you'd like to have knowledge of and take into consideration. But you got to always also think. But in this particular case, you know, you can't, while you try to err on the safe side of things, you've got to go with the information that you have at the moment. And as that information is coming in, you have to make judgment calls. And you make judgment calls based on the information that you had. And you know, decisions were made based upon the information that we had at that moment and had developed after the officers went there and what we knew prior to going there.
And so in this particular instance, when you're trying to talk to somebody that will be arrested, but you know that they have expressed suicidal thoughts before, how do you approach that? What are some of the techniques that your officers
I think
use?
it's just a lot of it's based upon, you know, training and experience. I mean, you try not to add to the situation. You know, you try not to make the situation worse. And I think somebody could always after the fact say, well, you should have tried this, or you should have said this. It's just kind of based on how I will tell you this: police officers today deal with a tremendous amount of mental illness. It is almost daily that officers are interacting with people with mental illness, and I'm not saying that in this case there was mental illness involved. I don't want to make it sound like that. I'm saying generally speaking, you know, we did have certain information regarding this individual. However, I don't want to make it sound like, you know, I'm not diagnosing this man. I don't know enough about him. I'm not a psychiatrist, and I'm not certainly diagnosing anything about his mental capacity. And I don't want to seem like I am, because I'm not.
Sure, I understand that.
Yeah.
And so at what point, is there an average amount of time where you realize this isn't working?
Well, what happened was, in this particular case, there was a cease in dialogue. There was a, you know, and then that's when the judgment comes in, because you know, at the end of the day, no police officer wants to feel that they're responsible for somebody taking their life, and preservation of life is a primary importance of police officers. And you know, that's the consideration, is, you know, maintaining and preserving human life. And you know,
so he just wasn't at some point he just wasn't responding at all.
Right.
Essentially. Okay. And when he was responding, could you give me examples of what he was saying?
I can't.
That's
really
okay.
say that,
And so once you are in the situation of being in the apartment, you know, once you've breached the apartment, is that kind of when you don't entirely know what to expect or what's next?
Well, at that point, once a decision is made, then you've committed to something. So then you have to, you know, you have to see it through to, you know, to the end result.
And so, considering, you know, that this man did take his own life and everything, which I'm sure your officers in the moment knew was a very real possibility given his expressions and, you know, how he was acting, would you be comfortable talking about what that's like for them? Like, how did they respond? Just in a general sense, you don't have to name the officers or anything, but...
Well, I know that no police officers, you know, police officers don't go to work in the morning expecting like this stuff. You know, in the back of your mind, you always maybe think there's a possibility that something, you know, could happen like this, but you certainly don't. You don't expect it. You don't look for it. You know, police officers have to be trained to respond to the actions of something that's initiated by someone. So it's a reactive situation. People clearly control a police response. Okay, so if there's a situation where somebody, initiates something that forces a police response, it's not because the officers are looking for it or necessarily even want to. It's because a person has done something which is now forcing a police response or an escalation by the police, based upon an individual's actions. It's kind of the old analogy that if I tell you you're under arrest and you put your hands out and I put the handcuffs on you, okay, well, 99.9% of the time, then everybody goes back to the police station and everything gets resolved. If I tell you you're under arrest and you choose to resist arrest, whether you feel the arrest is lawful or not, you don't have a right to resist an arrest. You have a right to go to court and to say why you think that it was unlawful, right? But if you resist arrest and then in a struggle, you get tasered, well, that use of that taser, as long as it's justified within the policies of the department, is justified because you're resisting arrest. If an officer walks up to you and shoots you with a taser for no reason, well, then he's made a mistake. So,
Right. And I know after the situation happened, I talked to some people about why domestic calls are so unpredictable and some of the most dangerous.
Mm-hmm.
And is it just that reactive thing where you're going into a situation where you're reacting to somebody in an area you don't know?
A lot of it has to do with, listen, people are very unpredictable when they're upset, when they're angry, when there's anxiety, domestic situations, family arguments, they're very volatile. And, introduce narcotics, introduce alcohol, introduce weapons, and all these different things, as well as people's emotions. And people can become very unpredictable, and that's why they're dangerous. I mean, that's for police officers, it's an unpredictable nature of what's going on in a situation between two people who are in some form of relationship, okay, whether they be a father and a son, a boyfriend and a girlfriend, a husband and wife, and then something is escalated to the point where law enforcement is getting involved. I mean, it's really, that's what leads to it. It's the unpredictability of people's behavior, because it's an emotional situation.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. And how do you think the two departments, I mean, because you kind of had both of them,
Mm-hmm.
how do you think they've handled the situation? Was there any adjustment period? Like, what was that like?
I'm very proud of the officers, everybody involved. Everybody that was involved is back to work. Everybody that's involved has went to mandatory, sit-down discussion, debriefing, and it's something I'm sure that everybody will always remember. I mean, it'll always be an incident that people will always remember as part of their career. But everybody's back to work and doing their job. So, yeah.
Has this ever happened in the village or the town where
An officer shot?
an officer was shot, or like somebody took their life as a result of a call?
I can tell you, well, to my knowledge, this department in Maybrook, there's never been a on-duty firearm discharge in a shooting situation, an officer-involved shooting. There's some historical, I believe, like the chief in Walden in like 1901 got shot or something, but I don't know much about that. There's some story about that, I hear. But yeah, right. But there's never been an officer-involved shooting, to my knowledge, here. And I grew up here, so I mean, that was my time. Involving either department.
Okay.
Yeah.
And obviously you're asking me.
That's okay.
I don't know if I have other questions. I guess just how are you doing now? Are you in a good place? You've
Taking a few
adjusted-
vacations. I'm going fishing tomorrow, so
That's good.
yeah, I'm good.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And do you have children, a family?
I have 2 children.
How did they?
Not bad. I have a 22-year-old daughter and a 14-year-old son. Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah, here's my family here.
Oh.
That's my 3rd wife. She's not the mother of either one of them, but that's my family.
Aww.
But
and your son's doing okay?
Yeah, he is. He's good. No, I mean, obviously a little upset, at the beginning. I mean, my wife is a nurse, and she works at Danbury, Connecticut Hospital, so we had to get her here, so she was a little upset getting here, but not knowing what's going on. I think that's probably what the most thing is, with people is they don't know, so you tell them, and you don't know what to think. Then all of a sudden everything just starts to, you start to go crazy, right? But, so, yeah, no, it was good.
And speaking of that, okay, so my last question is, another thing I talked to Dennis about was just that, right after the incident, and we talked about how the police went into the apartment, and a lot of people didn't actually read the article we posted online that said they had talked to the man for 40 minutes before going inside. Yeah. Are there certain types of maybe misconceptions or ideas about how police respond to these situations?
Yeah. Well, here's what I can say. I can say there's a lot of misconceptions about, not just in this event, a lot of misconceptions about police procedures, just in general. Most police administrators will tell you that it's probably a combination of television and movies, and what people think actually what policing entails, and also public perception a lot today. A lot of negativity toward police today, and listen, police officers make mistakes like everybody else, but there's so much kind of antagonistic criticism toward police officers, and what's amazing to me is this entire event is on video. Okay, it's on video and audio, and this whole trend about the body cameras, and people going back a couple of years ago, they want every cop in the country to have a body camera, and so police agencies start going in that direction, and the body cameras you should have stock in the companies that make body cameras, right? But what you're finding now, what's trending, is you're finding that even though you now have many incidents coming out to light and going public with these police-involved shootings, and it's in black and white, and 99% of the time, the officers involved are within the law and act properly. And now it almost kind of seems like that's not good enough. Like, people don't want to believe what they're seeing. So it's like, when does it end? How far does it go? So now you got body camera live footage, and you're now still defending your actions as though you had as though it was before there was even such a thing as a body camera. I mean, that's one of the things that seems to be happening now.